Our next speaker is Dr. Simone Skeen, who is a National Institute of Mental Health T32 postdoctoral fellow in the Mindness for Health Equity Lab in the Department of Psychiatry and Human Behavior in the Warren Albert Medical School, Brown University. That's a lot to fit on your. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Doctor, first of all, I should congratulate her. She is a recent graduate from here. So, students, there is a future for you. Her work integrates applied AI language modeling, HIV social epidemiology, computational social science, and digital therapeutics optimization with a particular focus on LLM alignment and smartphone delivered just-in-time adaptive intervention design. She is a licensed eligible forensic mental health counselor specializing in adolescent HIV prevention, crisis de-escalation, trauma-informed care, community-engaged service planning, and harm reduction, and has put together a very interesting talk on one of her LLM chatbots. Welcome. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm going to do my own timing. I'll set this for 9. When it goes off, I'll get my act together. And it's running. Thank you so much, Paul. I'm going to talk a bit about the history of and contemporary issues in mental health chatbots through the lens of my own work in progress called MyLight. That history begins as far back as 1966 with Joseph Weizenbaum's ELIZA, the first widely reported conversational agent for mental health. ELIZA used a typewriter as a user interface. It was an ingenious solution for matching and ranking keywords and reassembling syntax. ELIZA was simple conceptually, but the mapping and the underlying rule sets were anything but, particularly for the period. ELIZA was extensible. Its recognition patterns and responses could be customized, and the best known of these by far was called the doctor script, which in essence rephrased and reflected the user inputs. This behavior is exemplified by this exchange denoted in red right up there, which leverages capture and substitution logics shown below. This is often portrayed as a sort of clever jab at Rogerian psychotherapy. All they do is repeat their own words back to you. If you've been in talk therapy, you've probably experienced this. This is a real play with an ELIZA simulation. What's actually happening is that if I reflect your disclosure right back at you, you feel affirmed in your insights and your ability to communicate them. This bypasses the kind of defensiveness that typically arouses when we're being peppered with questions. It's called reflective listening, and it's such an effective mechanism of action. It's actually baked into manualized best evidence interventions like motivational interviewing. And it's rooted in Carl Rogers' principles of humanistic psychology and client-centered psychotherapy. In 1966, Rogers' notions that we understood ourselves and our own needs better than anyone else were actually quite radical. This was still the era of Freud and B.F. Skinner. It was a sophisticated bit of engineering under constraints to ground ELIZA's doctor script in these techniques in ways that still matter today. Overarchingly, there are 2 paradigms for text generation by a conversational agent, being very, very reductive with that: deterministic and probabilistic. These are reliant on rule sets and pre-scripted dialogue trees on the one hand, and probabilistic modeling on the other. Now, unique to probabilistic deep learning is the ability to generate new samples, to generate new images, text, audio, that incorporate fine-grained adjacencies in their training data, as we've already seen. These are called conditional generations, conditioned on an input text, also called a prompt, and tweaked with a degree of randomness that enhances readability. This is how we interact with most contemporary conversational agents, which are essentially wrappers for transformer-based LLMs that can condition generations on thousands of input tokens versus matching and ranking a handful of keywords. ELIZA was deterministic, but deterministic conversational agents, particularly in digital psychiatry, are not relegated to antiquity. Woebot, until shutting down this year, was fully deterministic, that it was all pre-scripted to deliver nothing but best evidence cognitive behavioral therapy, primarily for depressive symptoms. In fact, in 2023, Woebot's founder delivered something of a prescient broadside against incorporating LLMs into digital psychiatry without regulatory guardrails and very hard-won empirics on safety and efficacy. And in 2025, we're forced to recognize why. Hallucinations, phenomenon like delusion reinforcement through sycophancy, are potentially life-threatening in any psychiatric or biomedical context. As practitioners of behavioral medicine, the fundamental uncertainty we confront when we embrace probabilistic token generation is a very real concern. But I would argue that it's not fatal. The reason I dwell on Weizenbaum is because of his careful alignment of ELIZA's technical capacities and humanistic principles, because we see relatively little of it in particularly engagement-hacked mainstream AI therapy offerings. There is a place for LLMs in digital psychiatry, but finding it involves a degree of humility regarding their real capabilities these days. And one area that's bursting with potential is LLM's ability to deliver softer psychoeducation and impart skills like mindfulness meditation. Which brings me to retrieval augmented generation, or RAG architectures, and to my own very nascent prototype that we call MyLight. ELIZA could not store knowledge. Whether an LLM can do so reliably, given high-stakes use cases, is contested. But RAGs deployed within appropriate circumstances can start to push us past these constraints. In the simplest terms, a RAG pipeline retrieves information from a customizable knowledge base to augment an LLM response generated to convey that information to the user. This used to be called prompt boosting, essentially passing a query plus salient chunks of knowledge to the model. So why does any of this matter for public health? In 2025, many robustly evidence-based biobehavioral interventions are still essentially entombed as restricted access PDFs, manuals that still dictate the progression of, say, weekly in-person psychotherapy sessions. But in digital health, all the action is in just-in-time adaptive and ecological momentary, real-time smartphone-based interventions that need a bit of adaptation. This is tough to triangulate, adapting a static, linear, but demonstrated effective intervention into a dynamic, adaptive mode of delivery without imploding the core components that made it efficacious in the first place. Our team in SBPS did just that with NOLA GEM in a gruesome, painstaking process of manually mapping stressor self-report inputs to SMS-delivered coping skills recommendations. And we have some very cool results in that trial coming out soon. We can approach this same task, though, with a well-trained RAG, and this is exactly what we're doing with Dr. Shufang Sun's mindfulness-based queer resilience, or MBQR. MBQR delivers a series of mindfulness-based stress resilience skills, and by embedding these manualized interventions into a vector store, the resilience building and coping skills they include can be accessible on demand via a simple semantic search, while carefully limiting our generations to softer applications where token output variability is not going to be catastrophic. I use a 14 billion parameter DeepSeek R1 via the Ollama framework, which lets you run LLMs on device, plus LangChain and Streamlit tools. Just a quick glimpse under the hood. This is pseudocode, it's very cleaned up. This kind of thing looks horrifying if you're not familiar at looking at arguments being passed to a function. But these values are essentially a series of knobs and dials that we can tweak to determine our model's behaviors. Tuning includes systematically iterating over these values and rating the responses, something we're doing right now. These determine, in a sense, the degree of creativity in the generated text, where with temperature, creativity refers to a flattening of the probability distribution over next token predictions. It's how you start to get really wild, unpredictable responses, and it's one of the ways tools like character.ai are engagement hacked. We don't care about that. And here you can see MyLight in action. The first thing to note is that this is the same prompt I gave a simulated ELIZA in an early slide. This is not bleeding edge stuff, but it's accessible, it's evidence-based, and in 99 generations out of 100, you get essentially stable conversational riffs on these same skills recommendations. You can see the reflective listening, validation, and then quick instruction on a mindfulness stress resilience skill, and it will close with an encouragement to practice. Similarly, we can see a prompt that describes alienation and internalized stigma towards the body, listing a body scan recommendation. Again, a generation that can survive non-trivial, wow, I really set myself up there, non-trivial variability in semantics while imparting the same underlying mechanism of action. And again, you see these same elements sort of piecing together as the cursor plods along. In fact, Nah, I should wrap it up. And finally, in an era where culturally tailored interventions are coming under political attack, the RAG architecture actually affords a unique degree of individual responsivity and personalizability. Here, we're able to retrieve knowledge salient to the needs of query users, but not overarchingly determinative of the intervention contents. And again, you can see that happening right here with a little bit of contemporary salience, reflection, validation, and then I apologize for cutting it off, but you'll get a skills recommendation and then a little bit of encouragement. So next steps for this work includes SMS integration, the primary mode of delivery that we're envisioning, with handoffs to deterministic dialogue trees, for example, to build in medical information on lenacapavir and post-exposure prophylaxis, the kind of things that don't survive probabilistic outputs, or at least can't be counted on doing so, as well as just-in-time adaptive delivery based on objective stress biomarkers, inputs from a Fitbit or an Oura Ring. Digital mental health is increasingly moving past high friction, high attrition, app-based interventions and towards much tighter responsivity mechanism of action loops that we can control using emerging tech. So in closing, I just want to emphasize that a little bit of humility regarding the proper scope of LLMs in digital psychiatry and biobehavioral medicine is itself a form of engineering under constraints, and the field could stand to do a little bit more of it. And that's it.